to the usurer's heart. The dead boy's love for Nicholas, and the attachment of Nicholas to him, was insupportable agony. The picture of his deathbed, with Nicholas at his side, tending and supporting him, and he breathing out his thanks, and expiring in his arms, when he would have had them mortal enemies, and hating each other to the last, drove him frantic. He gnashed his teeth, and smote the air, and looking wildly round with eyes which gleamed through the darkness, cried aloud, "I am trampled down and ruined! The wretch told me true. The night has come. Is there no way to rob them of further triumph, and spurn their mercy and compassion? Is there no devil to help me?" Swiftly there glided again into his brain the figure he had raised that night. It seemed to lie before him. The head was covered now. So it was when he first saw it. The rigid, upturned marble feet, too, he remembered well. Then came before him the pale and trembling relatives who told their tale upon the inquest, the shrieks of women, the silent dread of men, the consternation and disquiet, the victory achieved by that heap of clay, which with one motion of its hand had let out the life and made this stir among them. He spoke no more, but, after a pause, softly groped his way out of the room and up the echoing stairs, up to the top, to the front garret, where he closed the door behind him and remained. It was a mere lumber room now, but it yet contained an old dismantled bedstead, the one on which his son had slept, for no other had ever been there. He avoided it hastily, and sat down as far from it as he could. The weakened glare of the lights in the street below, shining through the window which had no blind or curtain to intercept it, was enough to show the character of the room, though not sufficient fully to reveal the various articles of lumber, old quartered trunks, and broken furniture which were scattered about. It had a shelving roof, high in one part, and at another descending almost to the floor. It was towards the highest part that Ralph directed his eyes, and upon it he kept them fixed steadily for some minutes, when he rose, and, dragging thither an old chest upon which he had been seated, mounted on it, and felt along the wall above his head with both hands. At length they touched a large iron hook, firmly driven into one of the beams. At that moment he was interrupted by a loud knocking at the door below. After a little hesitation he opened the window and demanded who it was. "I want Mr. Nickleby," replied a voice. "What with them?" "That's not Mr. Nickleby's voice, surely," was the rejoinder. It was not like it, but it was Ralph who spoke, and so he said. The voice made answer that the twin brothers wished to know whether the man whom he had seen that night was to be detained, and that although it was now midnight, they had sent in their anxiety to do right. "Yes," cried Ralph, "detain him till tomorrow, then let them bring him here, him and my nephew, and come themselves, and be sure that I will be ready to receive them." "At what hour?" asked the voice. "At any hour," replied Ralph fiercely. "In the afternoon, tell them. At any hour, at any minute. All times will be alike to me." He listened to the man's retreating footsteps until the sound had passed, and then, gazing up into the sky, saw, or thought he saw, the same black cloud that seemed to follow him home, and which now appeared to hover directly above the house. "I know its meaning now," he muttered, "and the restless nights, the dreams, and why I have quailed of late, all pointed to this. Oh, if men by selling their own souls could ride rampant for a term, for how short a term would I barter mine to-night!" The sound of a deep bell came along the wind. One. "Lie on!" cried the usurer, "with your iron tongue. Ring merrily for births that make expectants writhe, and marriages that are made in hell, and toll ruefully for the dead whose shoes are worn already. Call men to prayers who are godly because not found out, and ring chimes for the coming in of every year that brings this cursed world nearer to its end. No bell or book for me! Throw me on a dunghill, and let me rot there to infect the air." With a wild look around, in which frenzy, hatred, and despair were horribly mingled, he shook his clenched hand at the sky above him, which was still dark and threatening, and closed the window. The rain and hail pattered against the glass. The chimneys quaked and rocked. The crazy casement rattled with the wind, as though an impatient hand inside were striving to burst it open. But no hand was there, and it opened no more.
"How's this?" cried one. "The gentlemen say they can't make anybody hear, and have been trying these 2 hours."
"And yet he came home last night,"
said another, "for he spoke to somebody out of that window upstairs."
They were a little knot of men, and the window being mentioned, went out into the road to look up at it. This occasioned their observing that the house was still close shut, as the housekeeper had said she had left it on the previous night, and led to a great many suggestions, which terminated in 2 or 3 of the boldest getting round to the back, and so entering by a window, while the others remained outside in impatient expectation. They looked into all the rooms below, opening the shutters as they went to admit the fading light, and still finding nobody, and everything quiet and in its place, doubted whether they should go farther. One man, however, remarking that they had yet not been into the garret, and that it was there he had been last seen, they agreed to look there too, and went up softly, for the mystery and silence made them timid. After they had stood for an instant on the landing eyeing each other, he who had proposed their carrying the search so far turned the handle of the door, and, pushing it open, looked through the chink, and fell back directly.
"It's very odd," he whispered. "He's hiding behind the door. Look!"
They pressed forward to see, but one among them, thrusting the others aside with a loud exclamation, drew a clasp knife from his pocket, and dashing into the room, cut down the body. He had torn a rope from one of the old trunks, and hung himself on an iron hook immediately below the trap-door in the ceiling, in the very place to which the eyes of his son, a lonely, desolate little creature, had so often been directed in childish terror 14 years before. End of chapter 62.